Okay, going to do a quick video on setting up OctoPi with OctoPrint. This is a Pi 02, which I'm going to be using on the new printer. I'm also going to fit one to the Vyper. I've been using one on the Vyper and it's working quite well, but I haven't mounted it yet. So this has got the whole Raspberry Pi Zero inside, plus the Raspberry camera, everything that's needed, and this is just going to be mounted on an arm on the camera, on the printer, to show the bed. The process is really quite simple. It has been made simpler now. There's advanced options in the Pi Imager, and this is the result. This is what we're going to end up with. This particular one is on my Ender, which is in the other room now on the new shelving. So as you can see, you can control the printer directly from the web browser. It gives you the temperatures in a graph of the bed and the bed and the hot end. You can do time lapses. There's also OctoLapse, which is a more advanced time lapse feature. You have full terminal control, so you can send G-codes to the printer. There's a G-code viewer, which shows you a preview of the layer as it's printing. That's OctoLapse, which I don't really use, to be honest. Bed Visualizer is another tool that allows you to visualize the quality of your bed surface, and this is the old Ender glass bed, and as you can see, it's really quite bad. So that's the target, that's where we're going to get to. I'm going to do this in two videos. The first one's going to be setting up OctoPi and a camera, and then the second video I'll cover the Cura plugins and how to set up Cura to connect directly to OctoPrint and send the print directly to your printer from Cura, as well as have some basic control and monitoring of the printer within Cura as well. So this is going to be the first part, the first video. For your Pi, I would strongly recommend that you get a good quality SD card, SanDisk Extreme or something along those lines. A good quality fast SD card is going to make quite a significant difference to the experience you're going to get from OctoPi. My card is already in the printer and ready to go. It needs to be formatted FAT32, I believe. Well, it shouldn't really matter what you format it to, because the imager will do that anyhow. You'll also need some software from the Raspberry Pi website. So if you go to raspberrypi.com and then go to the software section, you need to download this Raspberry Pi imager. This contains all the Raspberry Pi images within the one piece of software, so you can just select what operating system you want to load and away you go. So raspberrypi.com/software, download the Raspberry Pi imager and install it on your computer, and when you've done that, launch it on the computer. I'm going to do this by keyboard. So this is the imager. It now has advanced options, which enables you to set a lot of the options that you would normally have to do by editing the config files. So when this opens up, the first thing you need to do is press Ctrl, Shift and X for the extended options, and this window will pop up. Set the host name for your OctoPi. I usually call it the printer, but because this is just a temporary thing, I'm just going to call this Anycubic. What this does is allow you, if you have the Bonjour service running on your computer or device, you can access the OctoPrint via anycubic.local or whatever you put on here instead of using the IP address. Enable SSH. Whether you're going to use it or not, it doesn't hurt to enable it. If you enable it, you can use the secure shell to log into the Pi over the Wi-Fi and change config files and edit things and such like. With Windows, I think it's putty you need to SSH. Mac should do it natively, Linux does it natively. Set the username and password. I leave these at the default. I know you shouldn't, but I'm not accessing this outside of my local network. I'm not really bothered about the security risks, so I'm just going to keep this as default password, which is Raspberry. I've lost the ability to type Raspberry. Configure the Wi-Fi. This, you need your Wi-Fi network name and your Wi-Fi password. Let's fire those in. VM02904221 and the password, which I am going to blank out, by the way. Set the Wi-Fi country. This is quite important. You must set the Wi-Fi country to your country, otherwise the Wi-Fi probably going to fail. I am in the GB, so I don't need to set anything. Set the locale settings. Again, I'm in Europe. London is my GB is my location, and you don't need the first run wizard. You don't need any of these three last options selected, and then just click save. So let's set all that information up for whatever operating system you now install. So we'll go to choose OS, other general purpose OS. No, it isn't other general purpose. Other specific purpose OS, 3D printing, OctoPi and OctoPi stable. That's the operating system we're going to put onto the card. You should by now already have your SD card plugged into your computer with an adapter. So you choose storage, and this is my card. Make sure that this is the actual SD card that you've got plugged into the computer. If by any chance this comes up with your internal hard drive or something, everything that's on this device is going to be deleted. So make sure this is the correct card. And then it's a simple matter of click right. It's giving you the warning, yes, and then it's going to write the OctoPi image, OctoPrint image onto the SD card. Once it's written, it will verify, so I'm just going to let this run through and I'll speed the video up through it. And at last we are done. Doesn't actually take very long with a fast card. So that's OctoPrint now flashed. So you need to open up your file browser, and you should have in your removable devices, keep in mind this is Linux, so it's going to look very much different to yours probably. You should have a root file system and a boot file system. In the boot partition you'll find a file called octopi.txt, txt. You need to open that with a plain text editor. Notepad++, Notepad will save in plain text as well, I think. I'm using Linux, so mine is Kate. So I'm just going to open it up in Kate. Okay, so this is the config file for the printer. You can change this line here to whichever type of printer you have. If you're having problems where it's not detecting a USB webcam particularly properly, or it's detecting you've got a Pi camera and it's detecting it as a USB camera, then you can force it here in this line to be one or the other. So we've removed the pound sign from there, the hash from the beginning of the line. When it's set to auto, it will automatically detect, or try to automatically detect, which type of camera you have fitted. That's going to work most of the time. On the rare occasion where you do have a problem, then if you have a USB camera, then you can change the auto to USB, and if you've got a Raspberry Pi camera, then you can change the auto to Raspy, and then that will force it to use the correct camera type. So if you have a USB camera, the line to change is just a couple of lines down here, the USB camera options. So you remove, if you've got a USB webcam, you just remove the hash symbol from the beginning of the line. This is currently set to 720p. I actually changed this one. I'm having to remake the video. The minus R is the resolution. That's followed by the X and Y resolution. So 1440 by 720 is for a 720p camera. If you wanted a full HD picture, then you would change that to 1920 by 1080 for 1080 HD picture. It can struggle with 1080p. I've started using 720. It's 1440 by 720, because you can get a higher frame rate. With 1080p you may have to drop your frame rate down to as low as 4 frames per second to get a reasonable picture. With 1440 you should have no problem going up to 15 frames per second. No problems at all. So that's for a USB camera. I don't have a USB camera, so I'm going to put the hash symbol at the beginning again to disable that. Further down the file here is where the Raspberry Pi camera options are. So again, delete the hash symbol at the beginning of the line to enable it. It's currently set to 15 frames per second, which is fine, and I'm going to set the width and height, so it's minus width 1440 minus HEI height -720. You can also use -quality 75, which will compress it a bit more, give a bit better bandwidth, slightly reduce the quality of the picture, but only slightly. So that's the settings I'm going to use. I will do some example lines for both the USB camera and for the Pi cameras, and I'll put them in the description, so if you don't want to edit these directly, you can just delete the line and paste in one of the examples that I put in the description. So that's the config of the camera. It's quite simple, just 2 lines to change and that's the job done. Go to File, Save, to save it back onto the SD card, and then exit. Safely remove both of these partitions and then put the SD into the Pi and plug it into the computer. Plug it into a power supply. On the Pi 0, this one is power and this one's data. So let's power this up and see what we get. I'm going to go into my router. Connected devices. And if I typed in the correct password, it should by now be on here. And of course it isn't. There we go, Anycubic. So its IP address is 192.168.0.27 and it's anycubic.local. So we should be able to access this via either of those options. Either the IP address here. The IP address will work on any device. The anycubic.local will only work if the device that you're using has the service enabled. Not all devices do. My phone doesn't, for example, so my phone I have to go through the IP address. So I'm just going to go through the IP address anyhow. So we'll just enter the IP address in the browser bar here. It does take a while for the Pi to initialize. It has to do some initialization before the web interface becomes available. So there is a delay between powering it up and getting this. So this is the startup wizard, the welcome wizard. This is basically fairly straightforward. You just go through this one step at a time. At this point you won't have any backups, so there's no point worrying about that. You need to enter a username and a password. I'm just going to use my normal password and create an account. Click next. The connectivity check is going to check that the server is reachable, etc. For some reason it's got enable connectivity check here, disable connectivity check, and you would think that this is actually enabled, but it isn't. I don't know why that one's in blue and that one's in grey, because that one is not actually enabled. So you need to click that. If you don't, it will just give you a warning that you've got to set it up. So click there, then next. Anonymous user tracking is providing information back to OctoPrint about your usage. I always enable this to enable them to develop it further. Plugin blacklist processing will hide plugins that have issues. So I always enable the blacklist processing. I don't want any plugins that's going to potentially cause problems. Now you need to set up a printer profile. So we're going to call this Vyper. And the model Anycubic will do. The print bed and build volume, it's obviously rectangular, the origin is low left, it has a heated bed, we don't have a heated chamber. The width is 245, depth 245, height, can't remember, what's the height? Oh, I don't know, we'll call it 300. I'll have to look that up, I can't remember, it's that long since I did it. Axes are all correct as they are, hot end and extruder is correct as it is, and then we just click next. Some safety warnings there for you to peruse if you wish, and click finish. And then that's pretty much it. It's set up and it's waiting for you to connect it to the printer. So let's see if we can do that. I don't know if this lead's going to reach. Yes, it should. I think just. If I heard that, that's the Vyper booting up. And there we go, we are connected. And as you can see, the camera is working. I can't show you the, let me see, maybe I can, maybe I can't. As you can see, it is working. Might be better that way up. So that's OctoPi installed, up and running, everything's working, terminal's there, everything's done. You can, if you go to settings, the plugins. I'm not going to go through all the plugins. There's millions of plugins and I've got no idea what plugins you're going to want. But if you go to the settings, plugin manager, this is the installed plugins that's already installed, and if you want to install others, you click on get more here, put in here what you're looking for, such as Cura thumbnails, and there's the Cura thumbnails. You just simply click install. Wait for this to run through. And it needs to restart, so we click restart. It takes a couple of minutes to reboot. I'm not entirely sure why it does that and then says it's not there again, but so that's plugin should now be installed. Go to settings, and here down on plugins, Cura thumbnails is there. That's the settings for it. I'm not going to bother going through any of that, but that's how simple it is to install plugins. Ones I would advise is the UI Customizer, Print Time Genius, Cura thumbnails, Custom Control Editor is a useful one. I can't think of the rest. If I think of any more, I'll put them in the description. So that's OctoPrint installed, it's up and running, it's controlling the printer, the camera feed is working, everything's good to go. The next video I'll cover how to set up the plugins in Cura and connect Cura to the OctoPrint instance so that you can just send the file directly to the printer and print it without all that messing about with SD cards. So that's the end of this part one of this mini-series. Hope you found it useful. It's really not nearly as scary as people think to install OctoPrint. Obviously if you have any problems, hit me up with a message and we'll see what we can do to assist. So there you go, that's another video for you. Thanks for watching. Bye bye now.